Though I am keeping distance, and I consider this the unemployed. Though I did achieve have achieved some music work, and that was it's like a musical a soundtrack to like a diary. Each track and the song titles kind of nonsensical notes to self. They're like Aphex Twin songs. But what moments that were captured important. I wish I hadn't done more, but look, at the moment, reporting Rogers and Gary Cairns' religious crimes, and there does not seem to be a single example of a religious criminal offender that is unable to separate the equivocation of their religious crimes with their identification of the just religious cause. And this goes to, the woman in America who heard God's voice saying, drown your kids in the bathtub, and then she's crying in the courtroom like she'd only just discovered it. But there are plenty of verses talking about Psalms saying that you'll be happy and blessed for throwing young children against rocks and stones to their infanticide, the killing of young. It's for this reason that, and ironically, it's depicted in the idea that a person should desire or ought to want to be in heaven and want to avoid going to hell. Sam Harris argues it very plainly. You desire what's complementary to the flourishing of sentience and well-being, and that's not what happens if you were to go to hell, but and that's what does happen if you were to go to heaven in Christian theology. Yet the commandments statements that are of what sort of behavior is permitted and mandated by the biblical God are disgusting, and you can certainly not to the the tragic loss of these drowned children, but touch the same book and to swear that you'll tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Well, by what independent measure is she to say that God wasn't helping her when she was drowning the kids in the bathtub too? How do you resolve that conundrum? And more importantly, how do you even approach that conundrum in a court of law that measures your sincerity by touching the Bible, the same book that motivated the crime, in the inauguration of the trial proceedings? With Roger Till and Garrett Cairns, I am, given what I understand of the liberal leanings of the current Attorney General, worried that if I report them both in detail to him, it will endanger his and his and his family's livelihood. but there needs to be something for what Australia is. America's got witness protection programs. We've got shit list rejection programs, and yeah. So the question of reporting the two of them, and to whom, resulting in what, and will authorities in the federal, within the Commonwealth, be placed at personal risk, is something that I've wrestled with over a number of weeks. So in seeking that counsel, I shall have to present a disclaimer, obviously, because the price that's been paid by me staying here in the meantime is that Roger's gonna conjure up a bunch of fucking last minute excuses and concealers, and on the basis of the fact that I've studied the falsification of theology, and that in about a decade's worth of serving people, one grumpy customer came in somewhat yelling at me at his point of initiation of verbal exchange. So something was obviously on his mind. It didn't pertain to my person insofar as he didn't disclose or voice a personal agenda towards me, and that I went on to serve him for years to follow. But that was the one and only customer in the history of all the people that I served while I was working. The customers are more sincere. There's a sort of a jive with colleagues that you have a click with. And then there's days that you drive. That's my driving experiences. Certain colleagues up the wall. But yeah, the patients are the most sincere. So exploitation or the usurpation, particularly given what's been done to raw material substances, the culture goes, well, cold and flu medicine will contain paracetamol, codeine at 8 milligram, which will be converted into some amount of morphine, but they'll say in clinical manuals that a minimal dose ingested to have any pharmacological or therapeutic benefit is 30 milligrams of codeine, which will approximately be converted by the body into the equivalent of 5 milligrams of morphine. So paracetamol, codeine, and there was ephedrine, and then chlorpheniramine malate, 2 milligrams in the night tablets to help counteract the stimulant effects of the ephedrine and help you sleep. But ephedrine was then said to be triggering certain amounts of euphoria, so much so that they had to tweak the molecule again. And pseudo means fake or false, so they come up with pseudoephedrine. And cold and flu tablets then start to contain the daytime paracetamol, codeine again, 8 milligrams, pseudoephedrine, and then paracetamol, codeine, pseudoephedrine, and chlorpheniramine and malate, sedative antihistamine in the nighttime tablets. I think I can remember from committing to memory. Pseudoephedrine is an orally effective nasal decongestant with peripheral effects similar to epinephrine and central effects similar to but less intense than amphetamine. It is a sympathomimetic agent, meaning that it creates an effect similar to that which results from the stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. Pseudoephedrine does elevate blood pressure, however, at the recommended dose should induce little to no pressor effects in normotensive patients. Which means if you don't already have high blood pressure, or if your blood pressure is normal, then the recommended dose won't marshal your blood pressure to the point of it being so high that you would be classed as a high blood pressure sufferer. But then they go and criticize pseudoephedrine on various fronts, and wind up then dishing out the same concoctions with phenylalanine, which was in Dimetap when you were 2. Like, yeah, so it's like they go, well, let's give kitty decongestants because we wouldn't want people getting high. But then what's these people that are like so academically focused in their personality, they come off as being too preoccupied and not lax during the moment to many people. And so what is the gauge for saying, this is too euphoric? And if someone who is not under the influence of a substance can generate or express the same character idiosyncrasies, then what's the definitive proof that the behavioral traits are to be solely credited to the body's absorption of the drug under critique? But I think any of the drugs that we co-evolved with, there's talk in Australia, the land, like we've given the land back to the original landowners. You're confiscating so many plants that have so much medicinal benefit, all because of big pharma bigwigs that go, well, make them take fuckloads of paracetamol so that they get the 8 milligrams of codeine up to the 30 milligrams of codeine, so that by then they've taken 6 times as much paracetamol as they should, and the liver can't generate enough lactic acid to break it down, and it starts to damage the gastrointestinal tract. And then they can go on a bunch of other drugs for the gut, Nexium, omeprazole, esomeprazole. So it's startling, and you'll learn if you work in pharmacy, the best experience you can have, unless you've got someone who's really arguing with bureaucracy itself, is to work with locums who don't have their personal paycheck contingent on the annual GNP of the particular store in which they work. They put their hand up and say, well, the pharmacist that owns this store is on holidays or can't work for whatever reason, so a locum will be assigned that for that day, but they won't be the owner of that store. So they have no agenda in being corrupt in serving you when you're sick. And they were the best ones to work with, the best ones to learn from, the best ones to stay true to the pharmacist code of ethics that they have on the wall. So yeah, if they're to put it to you that as a side effect of this medicine, we think you're too euphoric and happy. Like that's based on what? Are you proposing? Do you wish to copulate? Uh, what's your personal sense of my euphoria? And that's got nothing to do with Euphoria, who were the '90s electro group that made the song "Love You Right." But I respect that they didn't call the song "Drug You Right" because they'd wind up in the battles and fucking shit fights that I have taken on board on their behalf. Well, keep them away from. Stay away from my '90s winners. My '90s ninjas. And don't disrespect the code. So yeah, I mean, I think you can even ask questions. Well, why aren't warnings a placebo effect too, to some degree, or to induce hysteria? I love it in the pilot episode of American Dad. Seth MacFarlane is a fucking genius. Love him. And Stan Smith goes, we're a code yellow. Or a terrorist code yellow, which means that something may go down somewhere at some time, somehow, in some place, by someone. And Sam Harris argues that religion itself acts very much like a placebo. An overseeing God is able to somehow help you to mix and combine Nicholas Copernicus's conviction of the world being a globe. You have to wonder how it came to be that it was thought flat in the first place. I think it was people getting hammered. Slaves and serfs that didn't have manuscripts, thinking that manuscripts were the shit. Like, if only we could get manuscripts and write them. Getting hammered with stories and told, if you walk over this hill, you'll fall from the edge of the earth and you'll just fall. But they had to have still seen the shape of the sun blazing on their eyes, the shape of the moon, the shadow of the earth on the moon, and its variations, to the point that they would go, well, this has got to be our planet. It's got to be where we are, blocking light, various amounts between the sun and the moon. And like, that wouldn't be too hard to figure out in the Bronze Age. But if you were being hammered with like overruling kingdoms that were inbreeding and getting, where's my stack hat angry, I better execute a commoner, drown that commoner, hang that commoner, crucify that commoner. And they just invent the charges as they go. Everyone would have been in a fucking panic. And this would be the closest thing. These kingdoms were their arsenal, their military, their library, their media, their school, their parliament house. Everything rolled into one, and they would have been just doing things like weaving cloths and sheets and gathering berries and, Discrimination against orally ingested drugs. I see it as a bit of an echo, or like a rehash of Eve and the apple. Eve eats an apple. So if fruit, imagine it, if fruit can just curse the whole world, and redeemable only, payable on death of Jesus of Nazareth, then this pill will turn you into a fruit. And you know how many times, killing Jesus once a week seems to be, you would think would be enough for the Christians. Spong goes, well, they don't want to let him off his cross. But yeah, it's horrifying to actually think of why, if every single aspect of his appearance and aesthetic at his point of death, bar the loincloth, is all about his shame, mocking him and insulting him. But since he's redeeming a story whereby wearing leaves over one's loins was to conceal nudity and hide one's shame. So why did they grant him that courtesy? And it's fucking freaky to think about it. And it completely accounts for unmerited, undue police frisking of the genital area. Which they'll do. They'll do when you have pocketless you're wearing nothing but pocketless satin boxer shorts. And you'll get your testicles cupped. And like, what the fuck are you looking for? The true meaning of communion. A wafer biscuit between the left and right nut or something. An Arnott's wafer. Strawberry caramel coffee wafer. What the fuck, police? What the fucking fuck? To serve and protect and cup your balls. And then their superior tells them, well, that was actually filmed and it looks a bit ridiculous. Oh, take this cup from me. Oh, but where's the balls? Oh, I don't. Christ knows. Fuck. No, God. Oh. Yes, sir. Sir. Okay, sir. Yeah, so if you do, in addition to handing someone a substance, say, well, ingest this substance and the world will be cursed. With original sin, babies that aren't baptized will be said by the Catholic Church to go to, well, they haven't sinned yet, so they don't merit hell, but they haven't quite earned their way into heaven either, so they go into limbo. Catholic Church insisted that this place called limbo existed for years and years and years, and then all these grieving families, their dead babies. You know, is my dead baby in your limbo? Yes, it's okay, my child. Be calm, be safe. Your child is with the Lord. And the Catholic Church come forward and go, yeah. All right, Galileo, we've dropped the heresy charges on Galileo. Oh, there's no such place as limbo. You know, it'd be fucking seething. The next morning, the Catholic Church is inerrant all over again. Absolutely flawless. They don't get a fucking thing wrong. words perhaps could have been muddled throughout the lifespan of my education and training in pharmacy. They say things like, we need more patience. I was like, well, I agree. Like, I would think, you lose your temper often because of the idiosyncrasies of the patient that you're serving, co-relative to, where you are on your cycle, Pete. And we found comic relief when Little Britain came out. And I was like, I'm a lady. I seemed to calm Pete down a bit. But yeah, saying we need more patience in pharmacy. Yes. It's been my observation too. But solicitation of or coercion of a person to perceive themselves as sick in ways they're not. Well, I'm not the adjudicator to that prospect of interactions in healthcare, but it's against the first principle of the pharmacist's code of ethics, which is to take the health needs of the patient as the first consideration. And so why is it that personality clashes have any bearing whatsoever? They shouldn't, particularly when they're sick and your staff. And then there's slogans. Don't forget they've got their slogans to maintain upkeep above the shop door entry. It was the frustrating observation was getting taught, well, as an assistant, you're taught to make estimations as to how this principle has been honoured, but without assuming. And my favourite chapter in studying to be a dispensary technician was on the scope and limitations of a dispensary technician, which included concepts like that you may label and type the dose directions, label the prescription, print the repeat forms, staple the repeat forms to the duplicate of the original script, put it all in a basket. A technician can never give the medication that they've just prepared. Oh, and put on the auxiliary warning labels. A technician can never give a dispensed prescription to a patient without it's been passed to a pharmacist for finalized inspection first. And I like that because the nightlife and the party scene and culture that you get into, you kind of are asking for parameters. Like you'd rather parameters than sexual harassment. So when the organization that do the National Dispensary Technicians Training Course Certificate, they're very well. I think they're a good educational organization. But whatever gets, I suppose, in the way, and it can be ideology, it could be a religious bias in a doctor's head. You can have your skull fractured, be bisexual, not disclose that you're bisexual. Go to Calvary Hospital, and a doctor will say, on the basis that I think you might be a danger to yourself or others, despite you're recovering from a skull fracture, by which an emergency ambulance took you to Calvary Hospital in an unconscious state, the doctor has this sense. Like, well, there's actually no sense to the concept of Calvary. It's the seal of endorsement on the claim that Jesus of Nazareth's uphill march while being whipped and tortured with the horizontal axis of the wooden cross, perhaps attached to his back already, was thinking about you and your fucking future, instead of being in a frantic state of suicidal mania, which is more probable in your scientific opinion. So it's deceptive. If you're in the bisexual rights movement and community, stay right the fuck away from Calvary Hospital, because they're missing a hill and they're looking for they're looking to make human sacrifices. And without a hill to march you up, they've got absolute defiance of the Hippocratic Oath, commensurate to the proliferation of your sufferdom while detained there, merely and solely on the basis of inquiry. So from experiences like this, you will learn, a bisexual in the presence of a doctor who is Christian, because of the nails in Jesus, who loves everyone and dies loving everyone, then your report of being in states of pain to a Christian doctor will have the Christian doctor in fact feeling salvation vibes and tingles, rather than, can I help you with your pain? Instead they'll be like, sacrifice you, security peg you on the floor, and you get floor Valium. Fuck. There was no need to set the dogs on me. But so be wary of Calvary Hospital. So these theologians saying that they worship a God who is a jealous God, and what's demonstrating or bringing forth proofs of the truths of their religious claims. It's often that they try to leverage that it's your onus to offer a counterclaim. I was taught by my former Christian youth pastor, he would say, if anyone in your school says, "Can you prove that God exists?" say to them, back to them, "Can you prove that God does not?" He said a number of idiotic things to me. Don't wear t-shirts of supportive of the band Live, because Live backwards is evil. I was like, well, God backwards is dog. And a dog he was once I discovered Bible contradictions. But I think that leaving you to wonder why a religious proposition is true is all the leverage that apologists can ultimately have, because they do not have that. They have counterproofs. Our history is of for the vast majority of known truths, a succession of religion saying this is caused by this. The sun is at war with the moon and they're fighting each other, and that's why we experience day and night to orbits and planetary rotations and gravity. Whereas how often do you find it running back the other way, where they go, well, these questions for which there are scientific answers are now explained by Proverbs 7 verse 2. It doesn't really happen. But then, the uh, well documented social scientific and psychiatric experiments have shown things like, and they show that the placebo, what's called the placebo effect, is more its potential is more tremendous than we'd like to think. Was the Stanford prison experiment, where about 40 people are then halved into two groups, and one are told this experiment would be conducted in a jail. Half of you will be guards, here's your uniforms. Other half will be prisoners, here's your uniforms. And the experiment was supposed to run for a set number of days, but was cancelled because it was deemed too unethical an experiment to continue. Because the guards were bashing up and fighting the prisoners, and the prisoners were trying to off themselves in their cells. And then the story of the graduate master's degrees in psych students who go and admit themselves into a facility without disclosing their academic qualifications to any of the doctors or staff, and within a few short number of days, they've got 6 or 7 different psychiatric diagnoses pinned on them. And then they were only let out of the facility once they said, well, here are our master's degree. We were doing an experiment on your premises. We actually kind of outrank you in terms of training and education. Let us the fuck out. And so whatever principles that would be unveiled in all of this mess aren't coming to us. And so it's a rare and truly, as someone who hasn't travelled much and doesn't drive, it's nonetheless a profound journey from album to album. I'm pissed at how, the culture that was drummed into my head working in private sector is that to be on Centrelinks, to be a dull bludger, meant that I was selling off original CDs, the majority of all my albums, all my paperback books, just to avoid registering with Centrelink, until it got to the point where Centrelink told me, well, we don't want you. My Nintendos, all my Nintendo games and all my old Nintendo consoles, all pawned. And lady at Centrelink goes, well, we don't want you selling any more of your things. Okay. So there's extortion. So one of Mr. Tall's masonry parries. I challenge you to a duel. Any one of the artists that I admire has 20,000 times more integrity than the combined intellect and hearts of the employers that I work for at Capital Chemist. Without dispute. And as a result, self-education in philosophy became a resulting inspiration. I could see how it was like a remedy to religion, as well as a step forward, as well as a step through and away from it, particularly fundamentalist, evangelical, Christianity. And so really artists inspire me to that too, but you see the thing is they never make your decisions for you, nor do their works. You would have to put religion on trial before charging a single artist for their artistic works. You have to take the Bible to court and charge it. And once again, the very fine people at www.evilbible.com have a good index, a good enough index to point you into the directions of the many heinous offences that are endorsed as beautiful by this jealous biblical god of Christian theism. But yeah, suffering myself to the point I could empathize and then tear. I owe to initially to Korn, and then fucking smart ass John Davis in the album Issues writes a song For You, and you're like, fuck off, that's the song that we're thinking of, For You.
Good afternoon, Mr.
You son of a bitch.
It's been a long time. I'd like a taste.
Yeah, they're better ninjas than the Gideons. If you flush their Bibles at hotels and then you come back and there's a new replacement Gideon Bible in the drawer. More integrity in these artists any day. What instructions I was left with as a 5-year-old in kindy were protect your mother, protect your sister. And I had to work out how I could do that. And when you're, especially if you're a punk ass sissy, as smart ass as I could be, and a sibling rival. So I had to, I realized, well, I have to find, and there were friends around me, it was like, check out this album, check out this album. It's like they even knew, well, this will help Luke. So yeah, I knew I wouldn't make it unless I could somehow try and self-mentor. But you know, in the consideration of empathy, you realize the impossibility of knowing what hardships are like for another. And there's an alienation element there that just remains. But that is what that is. It's like a feeling of, you know, if scars could wink in passing. See you. Yeah, and so and to roll it back to talk of, you know, within years, ephedrine and cold and flu tablets going to pseudoephedrine, going to phenylephrine. They're still bartering the same arguments, like Oh, what? So the patient should just get whatever they want then, and and they have all these terms, doctor shoppers, and, abuse potential. But the thing is, everyone's already been robbed of access to the substances of which these are all derivatives, and in them being made derivatives, side effects that they wouldn't otherwise have are potentially introduced. So that's like like a mini grave robbery on two fronts. One, you're not allowed access to the root substance that could be grown naturally, taxed naturally, but would be cheap as it's in terms of sales and distribution. And therefore they introduce a bunch of arguments about going, well, this is not just symptomatic relief and treatment, it's lunatic junkie hysteria. So we need to make these spin-offs with all these side effects. Well, you've admitted it by evolution. You've admitted these substances were freely accessible to us when we were swinging from branch to branch. So you've already robbed the whole entire populace of knowing the base substances. At the epinephrine plant, pretty much natural speed, coke, opium. So then, while we're living as organized tribes, if there was a long journey planned, long walk the following day, breakfast would include epinephrine from the epinephrine plant. No bad side effects. No real addiction potential. The fact that we have cell receptors that allow these molecules to bind to them and generate a pharmacological effect was only made possible through cohabitation and coexistence with the substances and ingesting them free of policies, restrictions. So for pharmacies to then get all snooty and go, well, we're sick and tired of the patients always getting whatever they fucking want. Like, fuck you. You have not given them, you've robbed every patient of that in so many ways that they don't even realize. And now you got the audacity, because this brand of this generic has given you a bulk buy discount for the next 4 months if you order quantities of 144 boxes at once or more. And the profit margin in relation to bulk purchases was essentially the spinal column for these arguments that resulted in unnecessary patient discrimination connotative to their rights to access the right to health as a immediate contingency of the right to life. Duh. And that, in short, is why Roger Markby and Gary Cairns will drive you the fuck out of fucking pharmacy without a license and without you needing a car. Belt buckles worn by Nazi troop soldiers trained on crystal meth injections, discussed in depth in the book entitled Blitzed, which talks about Hitler training his Nazi soldiers to hone their senses through the use of crystal meth. I was told it mentioned that toward the end of Hitler's rise to power, and Eve, what's her name, Eva Braun, and poop, his love of poo, coprophagia, the love of involving fecal matter in romantic encounters, and he was accustomed to that. But what he never gave up on was his belief that he was acting as an agent of a supernatural being. See, now mysticism is tricky because it's there are vagaries. God can be spoken of as a creative force, the totality of everything, in a sense. There's a refined purity to the concept of God that I've found more in art and mystic writings, but it's not a Santa Claus fan mail me please, do it or I'll fucking spank you, follow my commandments, because I say so, and yada yada yada. This totalitarian supervisor that never leaves us alone to grow up and mature. One approach is that it's fallacious to anthropomorphize. So when we were less cultured than we are now, you know, you might drop and break a glass and then call the glass stupid because it shattered when it impacted the floor. You would self-correct for having accidentally dropped it or deliberately dropping it, but you wouldn't endow a conscious mind like on the tree of knowledge of all good and evil. You wouldn't presume it to have a nervous system and a brain. So similarly, it's mystics who explore the philosophy, and it's a fringe argument whether this gets classed as philosophy or theology, because it's argued there's a line meted where if theology fails to establish a fact in its axioms, then it's not even philosophy. And so there are lines drawn, but I'm not the Zen master of what's what. In that regard, I'm new to it. So God encounters and God experiences can be legitimate without a likening to a bodily possession by an alternative mind than your own. So there is no loss of independence, no loss of self-definition. But yeah, there's spiritual enlightenment and those aspects of religion that I think actually are probably the most positive points of convergence between differing religions when it's asked what do we all have in common in regards to religion, that is to. And yeah, it's spiritual enlightenment that people would converge to agree on, and then they can cast, even if you cast aside the claim God exists. So it's like maybe the the language, the linguistics can be more refined and fine-tuned, so that it's not as if we're representing an entity, a sentient entity, in making use of the word God. And that's why I avoid it in social settings, because when I talk about Antichrist concepts and atheism, I don't want to be called hypocritical for what I'd have to say about like transcendentalism and but I get the point that people like Sam Harris make, where you know, if you are addressing a group of like an audience of hundreds of people, and you're to talk about the significance of God, 99% to 100% of the people occupying those seats are not going to be thinking of a modern mystic transcendentalism, God concept that has explored, exhausted, and abolished all these fallacious arguments positing a Santa Claus, supernatural, fucking overlord. And so, yeah, that's the idea. Like, you're waiting for a bus and you stub your toe on a rock. You fucking rock. What the fuck were you doing? Like, you're trying to fuck up my bus trip. You fucking stupid rock. Like, you won't get far. You won't get far endowing a rock with the... implying that you're endowing the rock with the traits of a sentient human being that conspired to the tune of sabotaging your capacity to board a bus for a bus trip. So they say so it is with God as well. So they make it so you can still say things like, in God we trust. And we're not talking about, it's kind of like a networking in a way. Going beyond yourself, be true to yourself, these sorts of... A lot of it involves the absence of the use of words as well, so this is no time of night for me to give a little monologue on that tangent. I just merely wanted to establish that there is consistency in being an antichrist, an unbeliever, in the claims and agenda of the religious right, and yet having your own sense of God, your own sense of Jesus, and the Bible on your own terms, Jesus in the Bible on your own terms. Or else it's who can you trust scenario, and you haven't really experienced the like moments of personal resolve. So anyway, let's start on that. Here's Tom with the weather.